I remember the sound of the boots of the soldiers marching down our street, and my mother spit on the ground in front of an officer, and he grabbed her in the neck and said, "I wouldn't do that again if I were you." The worst time in history that I remember, and I have never and can never forget it. I grew up in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and we were invaded by the German troops in May 10, 1940. My mother said, German troops have landed at Schiphol, which is the largest airport. I was 10 years old. What did that feel like? Well, it was war, but we didn't have to go to school. Well, you know, my sister was 7, so we went outside and we jump roped. My mother called us back in. She said, "You better stay in today." I grew up in a large city, and people did not have that much contact with each other. People were talking to each other. That was unusual. We could see something was happening in the distance. Hitler had the greatest paratroop army coming down. There was no weaponry. It had been ordered, but had not arrived. There was the enemy with their enormous tanks, and we didn't have a chance. Hitler had given the orders and then said no go. However, whoever was in charge of the bombardment went and bombed the city of Rotterdam flat. The whole inner city was gone. My aunt, who came from Rotterdam, she heard that people's limbs were hanging in the trees because of the bombardment. But our men fought. 10 Marines held a bridge in Rotterdam for more than 24 hours until the last one was killed. And my father, of course, being the distributor of the clothing for the Marines, knew a lot of his Marines, and he was so proud of them. I saw those poor Jewish people being so terribly mistreated that influenced my life. My sister and I, we walked to school every day. We would come from our house, cross the street, and take the Tolstraat, and saw the owner and his son, the boat Mr. Roegs, Jewish people, hanging out their signs for the day, and we would politely say, Goedemorgen. That's Dutch, of course, for good morning. Or 3 years later or more, we saw the elder Roeg hauled out of their house and clubbed with rifle butts and shoved into a truck. I am now in touch with the great-grandson of those people. He said to me, that was in early February 1943, and I said yes. And he said, before March, they were dead. So I went to a school with all girls in 43, and I was then 13 years old. We were supposed to learn to cook, etc., but there was nothing to cook with. Already there was everything was scarce, because whatever there was on good produce was shipped to Germany. So we are supposed to cook mashed potatoes, Well, we did. But however, we ate pieces of margarine, and that was supposed to go into the mashed potatoes. The mashed potatoes, which we did not know at the time, would be brought to the hospitals, because there was no food there either. But that was not the worst I did. We were supposed to learn German. Well, a couple of girls and I got our heads together and we said, we're not going to do this. Poor Miss Franschimo. You don't think about that, but she was supposed to teach us the Nazi language. We weren't going to do this. When we stood there, there were about 7 of us, when we stood there and gave Miss Franschimo a nervous breakdown, that is what we did. We stood and we sang our national anthem. So if you manage to sing the national anthem, you feel that you have conquered the bastards. This I did a soldier, with a rifle of course, but we still weren't good. We had to, yes, but I just didn't make my homework. They couldn't do anything about that. Our principal at school, he was very, very concerned about his students. I was called into the office. It must have been 1943 or so, and he said he had heard I was friends with Mary. He said I should no longer be friends with Mary because she was going out with the enemy. What Hitler sent us were either very young men or kids or old men, 65-plussers. But we had the 16-year-olds soldiers and we had the 15-year-old soldiers, and that's was what she was going out with. But I never did. I listened to my principal. My parents, we were supposed to bring in all the beautiful things we had, such as copper, zinc, rubber tires, because Hitler could use that for his war machine. My parents didn't give anything to anybody. My father hid it under the floorboards. A teacher, I was helping out at my little brother's school. My school was spotty because we already had no fuel for heat in the school. And I was helping out at my little brother's school, and I spoke with one of the teachers, and she asked if I wouldn't mind delivering underground newspaper. Well, I said yes, and I put it in my in-between books. And I brought it to those people, that's the address, 2 addresses that she gave me. And somebody actually asked if I got paid for that. Well, obviously, no. It was a clandestine newspaper. People in the underground, they risked their life. A high-ranking German officer was killed by the underground, and they hauled people out of prison and shot him. My father, of course, he did all kinds of things he wasn't supposed to do. And the people were so scared for the SS that somebody ratted on my dad. And they came as we were having supper. My mother, with her very dark hair, that's the first thing they said, "Are you Jewish?" And we weren't. Well, I wasn't. My hair was a reddish brown, but my mother's hair by nature was very dark. So no, she assured him, but that was not. But when they were coming up the stairs, there was some contraband. And my mother sent me up the stairs and because we couldn't let that sit where it was. So I was upstairs. I did not see my father leave. They took my dad, and my mother immediately the next day went to the police station that we had around the corner and found out that he was in prison. Mom went with a letter from our doctor to SS headquarters and saw an officer there, and the officer said, "Well, your husband has confessed." My mother said, "He can't confess something he hasn't done." And the officer said, "Well, this is his signature, can't you see that he confessed?" My mother said, "It is not possible. You cannot confess something you haven't done." Finally, the officer said to my mother, "Vrouw, go home. Your husband will be home in an hour." And he was. She could have so easily given him away, but that was not in her vocabulary either. He was home. And as I came home from school, there was my father. The only thing we got from my father then was head lice and scabies. That was all between the fingers because that was around in the prison. So many died for all of that. I just think of the 6 million Jews that were gassed to death. That's horrible. I had, and I wrote that, a Jewish girlfriend by the name of Edith Pachter. I'll never forget her. She and I were in a play. That was the only fun thing she did. I had gone with my school to a hostel, I think, camp thing, when I graduated to the 7th class, or the 7th grade. And when I came back, I heard from my mother that Edith and her whole family were hauled away. I don't know where they died, but they all died. Now, my question has always been, if we in Amsterdam knew that the Jews were gassed to death, why didn't the neighbors of these concentration camps know that? That's a big lie. We knew it. When Patton came in, everybody was so excited, but we didn't know that he was going to go straight into Germany. And I, all by myself, I was 15 then, walked way out of town and stood waiting for our freedom. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. So I had to walk back. I did it the second time when we actually were freed, and we were freed by the Canadians. But I was skin and bones. I was 5'7" and 85 pounds. That's all there was left of me, because we had gotten down to 1 meal a day and there was just nothing to eat anymore. I wanted to get a ride on the tank. I was too young and too scrawny. So I had walked all that way to get a ride on the tank. Never got one. There were parties after it was over, and I jitterbugged with the soldiers. I was so light they could throw me in the air. We had parties, and I danced and I danced and I danced. That was wonderful. It changed me forever. I think it never left me. I have been to several cemeteries, and I can't help it, but they're all young people, and the tears roll down my face. I went to Margraven, where there are a lot of Americans, and the only thing, you see the name, and I saw there were some from Michigan, and all I could do was rub my hand over the stone. It never leaves me. It took so many lives on both sides. But as a child, I didn't look at it that way. I heard the planes going over to bombard Germany, and we were happy. Yeah, go boys, go. Flatten them, you know, that kind of thing. We were happy, but I learned much, much later, they were children too. They were children. And yeah, it was hard, but those children had a very rough time too. And my mother hated the Germans. Her hate was so deep. My hate was until 1990, when someone asked me to host a group of German musicians, and I said, no Germans in my house. And they said to me, but Hans, these people weren't even born at that time. So I had to reconsider that, you know. Later, I've been to Germany so many times. It is a beautiful country, very, very beautiful. And I had then, after that, all Germans at my house, and indeed, those people were not even born during that time. There was one music conductor said to me, Hans, I thought the world looked like that. And I looked at him, he said, with all those piles of rubble. And that's pretty darn sad too. I came to this country because my dad, who had done very many things during World War II that were not, as you call, kosher, just had developed this sense of adventure. So he thought if he would come to the US, it would be all adventurous. There was a quota from the World Council of Churches that stated that people who had been in prison during World War II could come to America. And my dad took both of my brothers along. My younger brother was 17, and the older one was 21. Well, I promised. My younger brother did not want to go to America. He had a girlfriend, and as that goes when they're 17, you know. I promised him, I said, John, I will come, because we were very close. And I came. Took 3 years, but I came. I like this country. And you never get me out of Michigan. The beauty of Michigan is awesome. I like Hastings. It's a lovely little town that I very much enjoy. I found a lot of friends here. Finally, my friends pushed me long enough. They had pushed me for years. Said, you need to write it down. And I said, I don't know how to write. And I always found an excuse. not to do it because I didn't think I could. But I got it together. It is a book form now, and I am actually happy that I did it because it describes my parents completely. As I wrote, I could see certain images and the tears were running down my face. There were shooting at a plane. A man bailed out, and I could see that he bailed out. He was above the houses, and eventually I could see, he was so close, I could see his face, and then they shot him. So, and the cruelty, because he was totally defenseless, hanging in a parachute. When I wrote about the man in the parachute, it came all back to me, and that's when I cried. I just, and I'm thinking, after all those years, you cry about this, but you can't help it. It was a purging experience for me, because nobody ever thought about giving us any kind of assistance. It was, we were freed, that was it. The message is the most important thing, of course. And I pushed that message so bad, so hard. I just want the kids to know war is terrible. Whatever war is terrible. I am fearful from time to time that a war could happen again. I want to tell people, don't have wars. It's primarily the children that ask me certain things. And when I go to the schools, there is a line of kids that want to shake my hand, or they ask if they can hug me. I have been hugged so many times by so many youngsters. It befuddles me from time to time. But they want to hear, they want to know. Peace, believing in peace, yes, I do. I pray for peace. I hope that it never, ever happens again.